10 days ago, a SpaceX Falcon rocket blasted off from Cape Kennedy. It carried lunar lander, Blue Ghost, made by Firefly Aerospace. Inside that lunar lander is an archive made by the Lunar Codex. It carries thousands of works of art, writing, music, and film, including an indigenous art collection. In 5 weeks, it's scheduled to land on the moon. Did you catch the moon last night? Well, maybe it was cloudy, you missed it. But at least once in our lives, each one of us has stopped to gaze at the moon. What did it inspire? I know that it inspired Shakespeare, Duran Duran, Claude Debussy. It inspired me to write poetry. For what is poetry but the essence of the human soul? I know a boy who wanted to go to the moon, but he was asthmatic. He had terrible eyesight. And did you know that spacesuits are one size fit all, as long as you're between 5'7" and 6 foot? Unlucky me. But I know a boy who dreamed of going to the moon, and one day he found it was possible. Not in that spacesuit, but through his poetry, put in a time capsule, sent on a lunar lander, and launched on a rocket. And once he figured out how to do it, he wanted to share that dream with as many people as he could around the world. What he wanted to do was to look at all of the artists who toil, who labor over their art, and tap them on the shoulder and tell them, your art is amazing. Why don't we put a spotlight on it? Why not the moon? I'm here to tell you today that anything is possible. And I'm going to tell you how to get to the moon in 5 easy steps, because I've done it myself. I've done it several times. It's not much different from going from Toronto to anywhere in the world. Step 1, choose your destination. Step 2, book a ticket. Step 3, pack your luggage. Step 4, get to the airport on time. Step 5, enjoy the flight. Choosing your destination sounds so simple, but it's so important. Paris or Sydney, whichever you choose gives you a ticket price, and it tells you what kind of luggage to pack. Moon or Mars, same thing, right? So it's very different. So from Earth to the moon, Toronto to Paris, same thing, just a 65 times difference. But that's our destination. So let's look at the tickets. To get to Paris, you need to fly Air Canada, Lufthansa, Air France. To get to the moon, you need a rocket. The first rocket I ever flew was yay high. It had an engine that was the size of a thumb, and it could reach up to 300 meters in the sky. Not quite to the moon, so scratch that idea. But the year that I sent that rocket up was also the same year that NASA launched the Enterprise. It was the first ever reusable spacecraft. And that marked a turning point in space. So is there a way that I can get up there through NASA? Well, NASA has changed its tactics. It no longer builds the rockets. What it has done is it's decided to focus on what it does best: science, training astronauts, building lunar landers. And what it did was it gave over the business of building rockets to SpaceX. And that was how a private company took over the job of launching satellites from Earth to orbit. Not to the moon, mind you, but to orbit. So can I book a ticket via SpaceX? Like I said, it doesn't yet go to the moon, but it does have a plan to send tourists from Earth to orbit the moon and come back down again. That's on a Dragon sitting on top of Falcon Heavy rocket. And the cost of that is $100 million. But wait, there are 2 astronauts on that, so divide by 2, it's only $50 million. I don't think we're going to book that ticket yet. Well, what if I decided not to send myself but a poem? Well, in that case, I'm talking about cargo. And the great thing about cargo is it doesn't breathe. You don't have to keep it alive. It's easier. NASA has landed cargo on the moon. It's done that many times before. So maybe NASA's got an idea we could use. Well, a few years ago, I learned of a program that they had, not the Artemis program that everyone knows of. That's the program that sends humanity to the moon. It's a precursor, a sister program to that, called the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program, or CLPS for short. In this, it went one more step beyond giving the business of rockets to SpaceX. It decided that it would step back. NASA would no longer build lunar landers. They just focus on science and astronauts and let private companies build lunar landers. So a few of them have already built that and are sending things to the moon. And how much does that cost? Well, think of it as a FedEx or DHL to space. SpaceX takes you one part of the way there, and CLPS takes you the rest of the way there. And that entire cost is $1 million per kilogram. That's a lot better than $50 million. It's still not great, but I'm going to book that ticket. Why? Because it's $1 million per kilogram. And that's a loophole. Because now we move on to the next step in getting to the moon. And that's to pack your luggage and pack it well. Now, when I graduated, took my PhD, and went and took a job in the nuclear industry, I had a side hustle. And my side hustle was publishing books. I've published 25 of them now, and some of them contain my stories. And my stories are also in about a dozen other books. If you add that all up, that's maybe 25 books in total. 2 of those paperbacks equals one epic 500-page book, like The Lord of the Rings or something. That's about a kilogram, right? 2.2 pounds. So if I've got 25 of these, that's about 12 kilograms. That's $12 million, and that's just for my stuff. I haven't even thought about sending all the other things that I wanted to send to the moon. So what do I do? Well, someone said digitization. Digitize it all. Well, that's great, and that works for some things, but the problem with digitization is standards. Standards don't last. Have you ever heard of Betamax versus VCRs? The word that I use today, or pages, is going to be obsolete so many years from now. So you don't bank on that. As it turns out, what you need is something like microfilm. And I know many of you haven't heard of microfilm, but what microfilm is was what was used in the past by spies back in the Cold War. They take photographs of documents, missile silos, and then they'd shrink them into tiny bits of film, and then they'd pass it on to their contacts secretly, right? Well, librarians also use them to archive their books and so on and so forth. And that's a great technology. The only thing is, when you send film out into space, it doesn't last very long because of radiation and heat. They tend to shrink and disappear. What you need is microfilm, except on metal. And as it turns out, you can use semiconductor technologies to actually produce pictures that are incredibly small. How small? Well, a regular photo is about 300 dots per inch, pixels per inch. If you use semiconductor techniques to etch that photograph onto gold foil, you get a resolution of 30,000 dots per inch. And if you do it on nickel foil, your resolution is 300,000 dots per inch. What that means is that it is so small that you need a microscope in order to see the picture. But under that microscope, the picture and the text is as clear as you've seen it with the regular eye. Bonus, when you do that, that 500-page book is shrunk to the size of a coin. Now that coin is 1 gram, not a kilogram, and we have turned that ticket price for that epic book from $1 million to 1,000. Now we've got that ticket, and you can use a microscope that's worth $50 at Amazon or whatever to be able to read that. So we know now that we can do this. So, what have we got? Picked out our destination. We've booked our ticket, and we've packed our luggage. Now we need to get to the airport. And what I mean by that is we need partners. This is all great in theory, but can I actually do it? Well, as it turns out, there's a lab in New York run by a friend that's able to produce these little coins on nickel, nanodiscs, Nanofiche, and shrink them down so that pictures are 1 millimeter in size and text height is the size of a bacterium. There's another company in Europe that does a similar thing with not as good resolution on quartz. It's a bit more fragile, but it's great for submissions. In Texas, there's another company that digitizes things onto discs that are impervious to radiation and heat. And this is great for things like audio and film, which are going to be much more expensive to do using this technique. Still another friend told me, gosh, did you know that you can save your photos on synthetic DNA? As it turns out, the stuff of life is able to be used to compactly store data. Not ready for prime time yet, but one day your cell phones are going to have a synthetic DNA memory. Still others booked that trip to Paris with 2 tickets, thinking that their BFF would go with them to see the Eiffel Tower. And then they were ghosted. And when that seat was available, I jumped right in it. What I mean is that some people bought payload space, but they couldn't fill that payload space. So I ride-shared in that and was able to get space on the rocket. All of these partners, I never knew that I needed all of them, but over time I realized that they were critical in getting me to the moon, and for that, I'm truly grateful. So we've checked that off. Destination, ticket, luggage, cab to the airport. So all we've got to do now is enjoy the flight. Well, 5 flights to be exact. It took, 7, I can't count. Well, there were supposed to be only 3, but it grew and grew and grew until we encompassed 7 flights, because it took that many spaceships for me to get the whole world on board. And what do I mean by the whole world? Well, the lunar codex now consists of artworks, writings, music, and film from 261 countries. That's more countries than in the United Nations, more than compete in the Olympics. It is truly global. You don't just have the American flag planted on the moon, or the Indian flag, or the Chinese flag. You've got flags from the entire world. 40,000 people, more than that. 250,000 individual artifacts. 149 indigenous peoples all over the world. And more to come, hopefully. This all started about 5 years ago when I was asked to curate an exhibit in Chicago. I didn't know that that year was the year everything would change. The year was 2020. And you all know what that means. COVID, lockdown. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Schools moved into living rooms. And for artists, it was devastating. Music halls were closed. Galleries were shuttered, including my own exhibit. And so, looking for a way to find joy in that darkness and realizing that clips existed, a light bulb went in my head, and I took a silver disc, etched a few characters on it, and gave it to my clips partner. They would put it on a lunar lander and head it out to the moon. I told people about this, and everybody I told found some sort of joy in it and said, "This is incredible. Can I join in?" And as this project evolved from a personal memento to be preserved on the moon into one that encompassed art from every single country and territory around the world, the Lunar Codex was born. We brought on board anthologies, art magazines, catalogs, music catalogs in the thousands. And one of the greatest decisions we made was this: that we would charge artists nothing, zero. The cost of curation, of preserving, the cost of the payload, the cost of the launch, we would take care of all of that. That meant that the art was on board because of its value, not because of the size of the artist's wallet. Curation was by gallerists, editors, collectors who knew the genre. I had a big Rolodex of them, and they helped me with that. And that defined the Lunar Codex. Our first shot orbited the moon successfully and came back to Earth, 2022. Our second one launched in 2024 in January, and unfortunately it failed. Space is hard. But our third launch on the Athena, on the Odysseus lander by Intuitive Machines, on February 22, 2024, landed on the moon. It was the first successful landing of the Lunar Codex. It was the first lunar landing by a private company and the first successful US landing in over 50 years. The work goes on. A fourth lander, as I told you, launched just this January and is scheduled to land in February, March. We have another launch in February, another launch in November, another launch in December. And just the other week, someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Sam, what about Mars? What about Mars?" And what is the message in these time capsules, these messages in a bottle that we've sent out to the sea of space? Well, an artist from Australia told me, this is the world, united in peace at last. A poet told me, it's amazing. We've gone to the moon not just with our science, but with our art. For what is art but the essence of the human soul? One of the things I learned in this experience is that every one of us in the world, including those of us in this theater, you, and you, have something in our souls to share with the world, whether it be in music, in color, or in words. Like the artist that you bought a watercolor from in Kensington Market, or that singer in Paris at Saint Laurent that you applauded. Illuminated by the light of the moon, celebrated in the Lunar Codex, in one grand mosaic of humanity. Thank you very much.